Hey buddy, it's Peter, and this is the 2025 Can-Am Origin electric motorcycle. Fully electric motorcycle, which means it's not for everybody. In 2025, there are no electric motorcycles that are built to replace all the gas motorcycles and be for everyone. But this one is interesting. It brings new technology to the space and it makes it more mainstream than a lot of others in the class. So if you're saying, hey, electric motorcycles aren't for you, no problem. Don't buy this, then this isn't for you. But for people who have a little bit extra money to spend, want something zero emissions, and want a unique riding experience with technology that isn't in other electric motorcycles, this one has some things to offer. It's moving the electric motorcycle space closer to mainstream. I don't think electric motorcycles are going to replace gas motorcycles anytime soon, but I do think there is still going to be room for some electric motorcycles alongside gas motorcycles in the not so distant future, and this is a great example of what's going on. So there's my quick intro. I am filming here at Extreme Torque Motorsports, but I'm not at their Fredericton location or their Hanwell location. I'm at their Moncton location where this bike is sitting. There's two of them here right now, and I'm here to film it. So before I go too far, I want to say one thing. This channel, I review mostly motorcycles. In a previous career, just a few years ago, I used to be what was considered an expert on electric vehicles and all those kinds of things. So I have a pretty good background of electric vehicles and I have a pretty good background of motorcycles. So I'm hoping to be able to show you something that hasn't been shown to you in other videos as we talk about this. And Can-Am Canada, if you are listening, Can-Am, if you're listening, I really want to ride this thing and have it for a little while. There was some talk with one of your reps with me about maybe that happening. Haven't had a lot of talk since then. I would love to be able to take this thing out, have some real world reviews, do some trips on it. I do think you can trip on this. We'll talk about that in the future in a little bit in this video, but there's limitations, of course. All right, let's get going with this review. So usually at this point in the review, I talk about the bike and I place it in a class. Because this is electric, it's going to be much different to do that. This would be a lightweight adventure bike in any other class, but because it's electric, it's a little different. It doesn't have a ton of range to do some of the adventures that you would do on other lightweight adventure bikes. Now it is relatively quick charging, so you can do things, but you can't go out into the sticks and just refuel or take extra fuel with you in the same way you could with a lightweight adventure bike. So there is that to think about. So in some ways you have to have a use case of this as more of a dual sport, but it's really more of an adventure bike. And I really quite like it just as a comfort, as a size, comfort, manageability kind of thing. It's really good that way, especially in the adventure bike, small adventure bike class. Now, it is more expensive, of course, because it's electric. We'll talk about all that. I get that it doesn't fit into a perfect class perfectly, but it is something that's interesting, and I do think there will be buyers for this. A lot of people think, oh, nobody's gonna buy that. No, this is one that I do think people will buy, especially the Origin. There's also the Pulse, which is a street version of this, which is a city version. Again, there's reasons to buy that bike, but this is the one that's the most interesting to me. So what I do with every bike is we start at the front wheel, we work our way through. Let's do that right now. So if you've ever seen my motorcycle reviews, you know I like to start at the front wheel because it talks about the manufacturer's intent for a bike. You can just tell a lot from here. So what you have is a lot going on. This is an upside down suspension fork, so that's typical for the class. It is a 21-inch wheel, so a 21 in the front, 18 in the back. What that means is you have proper adventure bike or dirt bike tire sizes, which means you have all kinds of options to equip this bike the way you'd want. Of course, you have spoked wheels. That's going to be for added strength. This isn't a styling exercise. Sometimes they would go with a really lightweight alloy wheel, 19-inch, just to give you a little bit extra range. But in this model, going for the full 21-inch and the full 18-inch tire in the rear, they're really committing to what Can-Am does best, and that's their off-road type stuff. Now again, that Pulse is a city bike. We'll talk about that. It's highway capable, but city bike. But you do have the nice spoked rim, upside down forks, lots of suspension travel. You got 10 inches plus of ground clearance. You've got everything you would need here to have a proper adventure bike. The only thing you don't have is this piece here is closer, so if you get a lot of mud in here, it's not that raised fender of a dirt bike, which is part of why I talk about it a bit more as an adventure bike. So everything looks good here. You do have a single disc instead of a dual disc. It's not a super heavy bike. It's also not a super fast bike. It is top speed limited to, I think, around 130-ish kilometers. We'll check that out a little bit later. So you don't need double massive discs. A single disc is fine. And but you've got what you need to go on and off-road with the setup as is. So on a normal motorcycle, when I'm doing my reviews, we talk about what we would call the heart of the bike, which is traditionally the engine. Now this one has no engine, but I will show you a couple things that I really like. First of all, it's got a long swing arm. We're going to talk about that swing arm in a second, but all your weight is moved forward and low. On any motorcycle, that's what you want for good weight distribution. It's also a very narrow bike because it doesn't have engine components sticking out. Now there are some unique pieces here. First of all, that clean look is just something you can get with a electric motorcycle that you can't get with a gasoline one. This is not your engine. What this is where your batteries are. Now what's key about this is that Can-Am does something very different than most other electric motorcycle makers. This is a liquid cooled battery. Now if you go back in time to when EVs first became popular, electric vehicles, electric cars became popular, they weren't always liquid cooled. Anything that wasn't properly liquid cooled or well liquid cooled basically is a problem nowadays. I can't say for sure, but the liquid cooling is what you see in every proper modern electric vehicle today. You need that to have something that's going to have good longevity. In other words, less range degradation over time. It's probably also something that allows this to faster charge. And basically you can go from about 20 to 80% in about 50 minutes. That doesn't seem like it's super fast, but it's way better than a lot of its competitors that take hours and hours and hours on a standard plug. So this is not the motor, this is. And what Can-Am does here back is really unique, really interesting, and really makes this thing unique to ride around all motorcycles, and it's a better thing, not a worse thing. So jumping on the opposite side of the bike here, I don't know if you noticed when we were on the previous side that it's a single-sided swing arm, right? So you have that sort of BMW high-end look on the far side there. But what you have here is something that's completely unique. First of all, the motor is part of the swing arm, just in front of the suspension, but part of the swing arm. So that kind of moves with. That really allows your suspension travel to work very well. It has sort of an anti-squat built into the system. So right away, that's a really good system that's different than a typical chain engine, revving, all that kind of stuff on a bike. And because it's an electric motor, you have instant torque, which means you have really fine control everywhere you need, and it's very quick accelerating. So even though this engine, this motor, puts out about 47 horsepower, you've got a lot more torque. So it's got a 4.3 seconds, 0 to 60 or something like that, 0 to 100, something like that. So it's a very fast accelerating bike, all from that little motor. Electric motors are very powerful, very torquey, and they're very, very small. Now what you have in here is something that Can-Am has taken directly from their Ski-Doo lineup. This is an enclosed system, so it's a fully sealed chain drive on this. What that means is that your service intervals on this are about 15,000 kilometers to lube your chain. If you drive a adventure bike or a bike that goes through dust and dirt and other kinds of things, you are lubing your chain all the time if you're going to do proper chain maintenance. Most of us don't do it enough. What this one does is whether it gets wet, whether it gets muddy, whether it gets dirty, all of that is sealed inside, so it's quiet. It's also something that stays clean for you, and it's also something that it lowers the maintenance. Anybody who's ever had an EV, one of the key functions of an EV is not just fuel savings, it's not just environmental reasons or less tailpipe emissions, it's also that the vehicles tend to be lower maintenance, and this is lower maintenance than a regular gasoline motorcycle. This is really interesting because it makes the bike better to ride, it makes the bike lower maintenance, and it makes the bike exceptionally quiet. A lot of electric bikes still have a chain that runs around and runs on chain guards and still makes quite a bit of noise. This one, silent. So one of the keys to any bike is how does it feel, how does it fit to ride? And this is not a small bike. So you can see here, I'm about 6 feet tall. As I jump across it, my legs here are just tippy-toed, but what I do like is I can put my legs right in close. I'll put this kickstand out of the way, and I can almost flat foot, well, no I can't. Yeah, just a hair, ½ inch off the ground on both sides if I really stretch. One thing that's nice about this seat is it gives you a seat shape like a dual sport type bike. So you can really move around on the bike. That's what you want in a typical thing. Now it has got the edge back here. We're going to talk about this in 1 second. So you can move back quite a ways, but you have got that bump there, which is good because as this thing accelerates fairly hard, you want to have a little bit of a stop behind you. But you can also move well forward to position your weight where you want. You also have a good standing position on this bike. So all of that is pretty good. But a lot of these narrow dirt bikey style seats are too narrow and not comfortable. I find this to be quite comfortable. Again, Can-Am always has comfortable seats in all of their ATVs. They've taken time to figure out what an actual rider needs beneath them, and they've put them in a good position here. So there is no clutch lever on this side because there's no clutch lever, no gear shift, because this is fully automatic, or like a regular electric car, no gears, that kind of thing. So this is your riding position here, a very in-command position with lots of room to move around. Again, a great touring type position, great for in town, great for off-road, and of course your brake right there. Now, this bike could have a panel back here that's covered. I've asked that they leave that off because I want to show you how we mount things on here. You could also put a rear seat on here and add foot pegs. Those are accessories. This is a single person motorcycle from the factory, but you can add accessories just like you could on the Ryker. The Ryker doesn't come with a second seat, but you can add that on. You can also add accessories back here. So again, normally there's a panel here that looks pretty sleek. I don't have that. And normally you could put the foot pegs on there. That gives it a cleaner look. So it is a single person bike, but it is by no means too small to fit two people. You can absolutely fit a second person there. Lots of room. And the thing you get is it's a light feeling bike that feels extremely controllable, but you also end up with a lot of technology here, and they've stolen some stuff from their Spider lineup. I kind of thought they'd go with the Ryker lineup, but they stole stuff from the Spider lineup. So let's take a look at some of the controls here and talk about them. So taking a look at the screen here, we're gonna turn the bike on. It's got a regular key, we'll show you that in just a second. You don't know if you can see the exact graphics here. We are in the very bright sunshine. Normally I zoom in a lot further than I am right now, but I can't do that right now. So we roll the throttle a little bit forward instead of backwards. You would roll it towards you to go. You roll the throttle forward, and that clears some of those menu items. And then you have the raised side stand. So the left side here is your speedometer. Basically, the bike is off when the side stand is off. Now I'm gonna just flip it out of the screen. I gotta roll it forward to get the kickstand out of the way of my tripod. Whoop, just nudge the tripod there. We're gonna come back into view here. So if I lean the bike towards me, you can kind of start seeing what you get here. So hold, reverse, accelerator, that kind of thing. There's a start button here, and let me just hit OK. I don't know if I can get it to turn on without sitting on it and hitting all the right buttons, but what you end up with in here is a whole lot of information, which is very good. So we're gonna go over to your gauges here. Whoops. I'm just trying to hold the bike. Let's go statistics. So here you have average speed, duration, distance, energy consumption. You're gonna learn watt hours per kilometer if you have an electric vehicle since last charge, that kind of thing, and all that stuff can change. That is essentially your efficiency information. You've got some range information there as well. And then if we go back to our menu items, we can go to our gauges here. So the gauges brings you back to here. You've got the watt hours on the right side, but you also have the ability to, if I can get the right button here, pull in for different ride modes. So let me just pull in that. There's your normal, your sport, your off-road, your other off-road, sorry, your off-road plus, I mean, and all of those ride modes. And of course, when you go to off-road plus, you can see, I don't know if it says it there, but it says it turns your ABS and traction control off on the rear. So you've got several ride modes in this, including the rain mode, the eco mode. So eco, which saves you a little bit of range, which makes everything just sort of easy on the throttle, normal modes, sport, off-road, and off-road plus. Off-road modes deactivate rear ABS functionality. So there we go, that's what it tells you up top. So we're gonna keep it in the normal mode for now and select that. So you've got easily adjustable, easily choosable ride modes in this, probably more than you need. The Pulse has less ride modes than this because it won't have the off-road mode, so it's worth mentioning that this one has different ride modes than the street-going version of this bike, but you have a lot of functionality. The other thing you have in this dash is Apple CarPlay. Now, Apple CarPlay will only work with the Apple CarPlay will only work with a headset on. You have to have voice commands. That's just the way Apple set it up. So again, like the Spider, you have the ability to have your Apple CarPlay connected to this, and that changes things, but it's crucial for an electric bike because Apple CarPlay gives you apps right on the dash that can tell you where chargers are. That's going to be an important piece on this bike, which is helpful to have. So I would suggest getting a headset with this so you can talk to your Apple CarPlay, but also so you can start using things like, you know, finding your nearest charger through Google Maps, or using specific apps designed to tell you where chargers are, plug share, that kind of thing, ChargePoint, all kinds of things, flow chargers, lots of those. Some of those will work with Apple CarPlay, and that helps you out. So a lot of technology here. Let's show you how you control all of that. So taking a look at how to control everything in that screen. You have something that's taken directly from the Spider, from what I can tell. That is a good and a bad thing. The bad thing is there's very little like English controls on this, right? Like it says okay here, but everything else is just a symbol. So at first this can appear intimidating, and I would advise anybody who gets this bike to spend a minute or two in your garage just understanding the very basics. It's actually very easy to use the system, but a lot of bikes will have a wheel and a single control and an okay, and that's kind of it. This bike has a number of controls. So again, up here, basically if you're listening to your Apple CarPlay or something like that, you got your phone on, you got your volume switch there, and you can skip your tracks here. Then you've got the ability to talk to the bike, again, a lot like your car, a lot of cars have that. And then some of these controls, like I said, very easy to use. You just have to get used to what you're doing with them to adapt the controls. Some of them control the ride mode, some of them control other settings and other kinds of things. We can do a full dash review of this in the future if you want. Down here, a nice big horn, good signal lights, or good signal switch, you know, typical motorcycle stuff, feels good. All the lighting on this bike is full LED. There is also a high beam switch up where my finger is, so I pulled the high beams on, and a flash to pass as well. So everything's there for you. Just this general section, you know, it's something that reviewers might complain about like myself, but once you own the bike, you're gonna be able to figure it out very quickly. It's not hard to use. I've used it on the Spiders. It just, every time I come back to this after doing regular other motorcycles, I always have to remember, okay, what does this do? What does that do? And it's just the kind of thing where, like I said, gives you a lot of control, makes it very easy to do. You can feel where the buttons are, so you don't have to look at them, but you do have to remember a little bit of how they work. On the opposite side, let's show you the controls over there. So over here on the throttle side, you do have a start button, which is kind of funny because that's not actually turning any engine over, right? It looks like it's turning the engine over, but it doesn't do that. You also have a kill switch. Kill switches are required by law, so that's typical stuff. Start button, again, makes it familiar. You're gonna roll forward to get that dash to come alive. The other thing the rolling forward does is it does activate a regenerative braking. Basically, electric motors can capture some of the charge, and every manufacturer does that in a different way. This one allows you to use that rear wheel to regenerate when you want to, by just rolling this forward. There's a brake lever over here, no adjustments there. There's a brake foot pedal on this side, and that's the only controls. No, of course, on the other side, no clutch lever, no shifter on that part. So that, again, makes it pretty easy to control. So I mentioned earlier this seat here. I'm going to zoom into it for you so you can just sort of see the pattern on there. It's kind of a cool pattern. Sorry if we're flipping around there, but kind of a nice pattern. Just not something that's going to collect a lot of dirt, but it gives you a little bit of grip in there. There is a little bit of storage over here. And when I say a little bit, it's designed for one thing and one thing only. They do have a little USB connector right there, and this is what would fit your phone. It is sort of waterproof-ish. Most phones are also waterproof, so you can put your phone down there for your CarPlay. It is a wired connection, but again, it doesn't really matter that it's wired because you're going to keep your phone in there anyways. It is, I guess, a negative that's not wireless CarPlay because you'd have to take it out of your jacket and put it in there. But again, that's going to work just fine. So we talked about the seat on this. You can see that sort of ramp up on the back there. And then normally there's a flush body color panel that comes along the top here. I've asked them to leave it off just because it wasn't on, and I asked them to not put it back on, because what this does is this is your typical Link accessory, L-I-N-Q. This is what you have on everything Can-Am. So there will probably be some interchangeability between this bike and some other things. That's one of the benefits. You can have a side-by-side fit the same box that your Sea-Doo fits. I don't know that everything's going to be the exact same with the motorcycles, but you do have solid control or solid locking pieces here that allow you to get that Can-Am accessories for things like cargo, for things like an extra seat, for all kinds of things, and even just that panel that looks pretty cool. If it was up to me, I would put some cargo on this thing, take it out, do some day trips. We'll talk about charging in this in just 1 second because that is a piece of this, and it is, although the range isn't great, we'll talk about that as well, it does have some options. But again, you can put some luggage on this, and if I had this bike, I would go on some trips with it and do some things with it. You just have to plan accordingly. One other area you see these link connection points here is on the front. This one does not have a windshield as equipped. I would put a little windshield on this, I think. Again, a lot of off-roaders, if they lean way over the front, they don't want a tall windshield, but you could put a sort of a touring type windshield on this. I think that would just keep some of the bugs and stuff off of the display, but again, it's all fairly easy to clean. There's no real huge grooves in there, but you have a little link connection down here, up here, and on the other side, so you can put that windshield on. And it looks to me, if it's a link connection, it will probably be quick release, which means on a hot day, you can open up that wind protection and just let it come at you, leave the windshield at home, and on a cooler day you could put it in place and keep you a little bit more protected. So I kind of like the way they're doing that with their link system. It's kind of a smart use, and again, Can-Am is such an accessories company. They really think these things through as they build their vehicles, and it just shows when you see something like this. So let's talk about the realities of an electric motorcycle, especially this electric motorcycle. This one has level 2 charging. What that means, it's not just a plug on the wall, it's a true sort of mid-range electric vehicle charger. So it's not the super fast Tesla chargers that you have, but it's your typical fast charging at home. So something like an electric car that would take, 30 to 60 hours to charge on a regular plug can charge in 6 or 8 hours with a level 2 charger. It's what you typically see in people's garages when they have an electric car. So that is a really good thing because level 2 chargers are actually everywhere. They really are all over the place. So let's talk about range. This one is rated for up to 145 kilometers in the city. Now for most people, they're not going to get that. The real range that they've stated at is about 115 kilometers, which is not a lot. Let's not candy coat it. This isn't going to be for everyone, but the 20 to 80% in about 50 minutes allows you to go all kinds of places. And like I said, level 2 chargers are almost everywhere. They really are all over the place, especially if you're sort of near cities and towns. For instance, I could go on this bike and do Cape Breton, one of the most scenic drives in Canada, the Cape Breton Parkway Trail, or the Cape Breton, oh boy, that, you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you don't. Look it up, Cape Breton. You could do that on this bike, and some of the chargers on that, or many of the chargers on that loop, are all level 2, and many of them are free as part of the Canada Parks Pass. So you could do this 300-kilometer trip on this bike easily up and down some of the most scenic roads. The problem is most of us are probably going to want to trailer the bike to there if you don't live near there. Now where I live, I have a level 2 charger at home. To be able to go over 100 kilometers out on the trails, dirt roads, and that kind of thing, this thing would be a great trail bike for me. It would make a ton of sense. Is it expensive for a dual sport type trail bike? Yes, it is. Does it offer you more? I think it does. The electric drive system in this gives you more acceleration performance than most of the bikes. It's going to give you a little more control on how the bikes are. And again, it's going to give you that silence, which I think is pretty cool. When you can get it this silent, you get out in the woods, you can really explore things in a different way. The nice thing is this bike can also go on the road. So I've talked about Kawasaki's electric bikes on this channel. They top out at 88 kilometers an hour with a 15-second boost to take you up to about 101 kilometers an hour. This one tops out about 130 or so. And that means that at any legal speed in the country, you can drive this bike, which means if you have to zip on a faster road, you can. If you have to pass on an 80-kilometer-an-hour road, you have passing power, and you can spend time doing some of those back roads, dirt roads, trails, and everything else on a bike like this. It is intriguing. It's not for everyone. So who is this bike for? Well, let's talk about that. This motorcycle is absolutely for early adopters still. What I like about it is it's done some key things. Like I mentioned off the top, I used to be considered an electric vehicle expert. One of the key things you want on an electric vehicle is liquid cooling. It's going to allow the batteries to charge faster. It's going to reduce the issues of problems with it, which means you're going to have less range degradation over time, or losing that range over time. A lot of the, basically, like I said, air-cooled type systems, they just do not work. The other thing that's nice is you genuinely lose maintenance items with this compared to a regular bike. No oil changes, none of that. You do have a coolant in here. I'm sure it lasts a very, very long time. And the chain maintenance for a dirt bike is fantastic. Every 15,000 kilometers, it's a fully sealed system. So you have some of those benefits like you would have from a shaft drive without that weight, without that loss of performance. And that's all Can-Am stuff that's been proven. There's no new technology in that chain system. They've been using it on their snowmobiles for forever. So you also have a Rotax motor. Again, Rotax has been building electric motors for a long time. So a lot of this isn't really that new. Batteries have been in vehicles for a long time. What they've done is put a lot of great technologies together with less range than most people are going to want, but enough for some. More cost than most people are going to want to pay for, but cheap enough for some, and you have a legitimate motorcycle that if you can drive it within the range and find those level 2 charging, you can do some traveling with it, and you have great accessories. It's an excellent motorcycle with limited range and a little bit more cost than some people are going to want. And what that means is Can-Am is moving closer to having electrified motorcycles as an option for the mainstream. This is going to be looked at as a bike that was a turning point in bringing electric motorcycles into an option. I still don't think electric motorcycles are going to replace gas motorcycles, but this is very, very, very well done. So I'm hoping that this is just my original look at this. I'm hoping to get a lot more access to this bike, including a riding review, and I'm willing to do a short tour on this bike to go places that normal people wouldn't go, simply because I'm familiar with electric vehicles, I understand how the charging works, and some of that 50-minute charge time, a lot of times on an electric car, you can drive for as much as you want and just do a 10-minute stop somewhere, you go on a 15-minute stop somewhere else, and you can get the charge you need enough to keep going on your trip. And that's one of the things that this bike gets you close enough to do. It's just gonna have to be for someone who understands what it is. But as a pure motorcycle for riding, excellent job. As a technology for an electric vehicle, electric motorcycle, excellent job. This thing is really, really interesting, and I'm looking forward to spending more time with it and telling you more about the Pulse model as well, which is the more street-oriented model, which is a quite different character bike, but also very interesting. So there is my review, my first look review of Can-Am's Origin. Very good bike, very interesting, even if it's not for everybody. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you in the next one.